At Spoken with Authority, we do 360-degree assessments of our new clients who are onboarding for leadership communication coaching engagements. And what we all too often hear is that the folks who we are coaching tend to get in the weeds when they're communicating. They're subject matter experts, they know so much, but they tend to give too much detail when they're communicating either in conversations and updates that are less formal or presentations, briefings, and pitches. So to give us a little bit more insight into this problem, let's talk first to our colleague Amanda, who actually does the 360s for our new clients.
Yeah, so as part of our engagements with clients, we do these 360 reviews with different collaborators, which gives us a great perspective on where that client is currently at, because self-awareness is such a huge piece of the coaching process. And lack of conciseness frequently comes back as one of the things that our clients can work on. And what I get told sometimes is it's with written communication that too long didn't read, or if it's oral communication that too long tuned out. And this is very frequent as well with subject matter experts because they're deeply knowledgeable, they're passionate, but it's knowing your audience and knowing that not everybody has that same understanding, as well as assessing what they need. And one of the tools that, tools that you can use for this is have a trusted colleague that you can have a code word or a nonverbal cue with. This is maybe you approaching somebody, or you know that somebody has shared this feedback with you, and it can be something like marathon if you are the kind of person that talks for a very long period of time. Or maybe it's a verbal cue that you can look for on a Zoom call or an in-person meeting when it's a group, and maybe you don't want that verbal cue called out.
Thanks, Amanda. I love that idea of having a cue from a trusted colleague or friend to give you real-time feedback. All right, from here, let's hear from Michelle and then our colleague Lynn. Michelle, what are your recommendations?
Just as you all have previously stated, when a subject matter expert is really excited, they just go into liftoff. So sometimes being aware of those physiological sensations where you might be in a zone of your own, I think is really important. The other thing is making sure that your message is imaginable, and you make sure you're not going off to the left or to the right. And you can do that by looking at the facial expressions. Oftentimes, your listeners will look like an outsider and like they're observing you. So just making sure that you're in tune with folks' nonverbal cues that they're giving. And with written communication, you can go back and edit for need to know versus nice to know.
Thanks, Michelle. Yes, need to know versus nice to know. I know Bjorn uses that one as well. All right, Lynn, what are your recommendations for staying out of the weeds?
It's hard to add anything else to what Michelle just said. I was focusing on intention, because you want to be clear about what it is you want people to leave with. What are they going to take away? You can dazzle them with all the details about your focus of expertise, but there's a nugget there that you really want people to be able to take away. And if you have more focus on that, you might even hear internally, as Michelle was saying, do they really need to know that? No, I'm going back to my main purpose. I'm going to say that again and again, and then finish.
That's really great advice, Lynn, and something that people can take when they're doing a slide presentation. What's on the top of your slide, that title, should be an argument about your position or your recommendations. And when you are communicating about it, you need to stick with that key idea. And if what you're saying goes outside of what's necessary to make that point or to support that argument directly, that's what needs to fall away. So as you're cutting and making things more concise, keep in top of mind, what's the point? What is the most important thing for people to know? And we'll leave it there. Don't continue on. All right, let's hear from Lisa and then Bjorn.
Variations on a theme. The same things that people are talking about, what that takes me back to is that most of the important work we can do to make sure that we absolutely nail it and don't go too far to the left or to the right happens before we ever walk into the room. So to me, it's a big, it's a critical thinking piece. It's that audience analysis, and not just who's going to be in the room. It's going to be Jean and it's going to be Bjorn. No, what do I know about them? Where are they? What are they excited about? What do they already know? What are they most worried about right now? What kind of relationship do I have with them? So audience analysis, whether you have 2 minutes to do it on the way down the hallway to give somebody a project update, or a week to do it because you're giving a big presentation. There's just so many interesting questions we can ask about audience that can help us to really tailor the message. And then, as everybody has said, with that audience, what's my purpose? And that sort of leaves me with exactly the scope of what I need to say and what I can leave out. And I guess the one specific thing that I would say when we're thinking about what we need to say, this work that we're excited about, that's ours, and we know every detail of it, what can people live without? One thing that we can tend to get trapped in is thinking that everybody needs the chronology. So if I'm going to tell you the story of what's happening today, first I have to tell you how we got here. So back in 1997, and then we've spent so much time on backstory that we might have lost our audience before we tell them the thing that they need to know. So just to be aware that we kind of love chronology because it's easy, it gives us a starting place, but it's not always the most important thing that we have to say.
So true. When you're thinking about chronological structure, past, present, future, what do people really care about? Present, future. So the past, oftentimes when we're structuring presentations, that becomes a very quick introduction, and then present, future becomes the body of the presentation. Really great advice, Lisa. Bjorn, what would you add?
I've worked with people who sometimes will tell me that their audience is full of experts as well. And so that's the justification for getting in the weeds. And I want to tell a quick story about working with an attorney who's working on an opening argument. And it was a bench trial. So it wasn't going to be in front of a jury. In front of a jury, you might think, okay, let's make this understandable, but it was a civil matter. So it was a bench trial. You think, oh, this judge is an attorney, and they've been a judge for a long time, so they know a lot of things. And the more we worked on it, the more we realized that the judge is still a human being, and that if you listen to an hour and a half long opening argument, that if you have many layers deep on arguments and complex legal matters, that it's probably not going to stick. It might be the philosophy of the case, it might be the theory of the case that you're going to advance, but they're still a human being. And so you still need to have, need to think that way and have your most important arguments, what you want them to remember, because it is still your first opportunity to really make an impression, even though this person is conceivably an expert as well. And so being concise, even in the face of another expert, because they're still a human being with a limited attention span, and quite honestly, probably not as much of an expert as you are on this one matter.
Thanks, Bjorn. That's a really great concrete example. And it brings up the need to know versus nice to know and neat to know. Because does that judge really need to know all of that detail in order to rule in your favor? Probably not. They only need to know this. This might be nice and neat, but they only need to know this level of detail in order to rule in our favor. So that's a really great example of how to apply that need to know principle. All right, Jean, what about you? What are your ideas?
This is a lesson in panel discussions where previous speakers say everything that you had thought about in relation to the topic. But I will say that I think purpose is the key. And one of the questions I ask clients is, if someone who hears your speech walks out into the hallway and someone walking by says, "What was that all about?" There should be a sentence that you would like that person to articulate, and then use that as a decision rule as you decide what to include and what not to include. Related to slides, I find that a lot of times people are repurposing slides. They'll often say, "Oh, I used this in this other presentation." And sometimes that's when they're bringing in extraneous information that might have been relevant to the other presentation, but might not be relevant to this one. So that can be a nice way to start trimming down. And the other thing is how we use examples. I tell people, if you find that you're explaining a lot, you probably could do better by incorporating a concrete example that actually replaces explanation and will be more meaningful to people with varied levels of knowledge. So focusing on that purpose, being careful not to overuse previous slides, and then incorporating more examples, less explanation can help you be more concise.
Thanks, Jean. This is why when we're working with clients, we start with our proprietary sandwich structure tool when we're putting together a presentation or even an update for a meeting, because we might want to use slides to supplement what we're going to say, slides that we've already developed in the past, but we don't want to start with an old deck. We want to start with a new audience and situation analysis. What's the purpose? What are the key messages? What's the narrative arc? If you can repurpose that beautiful slide you already made, that's great. But it's a cut and paste job. It's not a start with the other deck job. In conclusion, I would give two concrete things that you could do in practice that I know that our coaches work with our clients on. And one is just to practice with a stopwatch. When we are practicing with our clients, we're timing them. And that's the best way to know if you are going too long. If you're speaking for more than a minute and a half, 2 minutes at the most for a slide or an argument or for a response to a question, that's too long. And you need to work on cutting material. The other thing is to work on using shorter sentences and pausing with your lips together purposefully. When you have those shorter sentences and you pause, it can help you avoid talking in circles or going on tangents or getting too far in the weeds. When you have that mouth open and there's an and or a but and a so, it just keeps coming and coming and coming. Be intentional about having discrete sentences, putting the lips together and pausing, and that will help you stop sooner than you otherwise might. That is our advice on what you could do if you tend to go too far in the weeds or have too much detail, so you could keep it at an appropriate level so that your audience don't stop reading or if you're writing, or stop listening if you're speaking out loud. Thanks to the panel from Spoken with Authority, Michelle and Lynn and Lisa and Jean and Bjorn, and also Amanda.